Hey guys, Harv here, and welcome back to Kerbal Space Program. This is our space tourism series, the show in which we take rich Kerbals and put them on expensive holidays across the solar system. In the previous episode, we did some infrastructure kind of setting up ready for this particular episode and the one coming after this, because we put some fuel reserves up in orbit docked to our space station, ready for an SSTO, this particular SSTO, well, maybe not this exact one, but this design certainly, to go up, dock to those extra fuel reserves in order to gain a higher capacity of fuel that will hopefully be sufficient to get it all the way out to Jool. Now, this depends on a few things, and not least on its pilot, because yes, we have located Matt Kerman. He was in orbit around Kerbin in our tourism centre. More accurately, in a ship in this SSTO docked to the tourism centre. So what we're going to do is bring him down from orbit, return him, and then get him into a brand new spanking ship, and send him out once more to complete the rest of the video. Now, unfortunately I've been a bit hasty, so I've made two main mistakes in the undocking of this ship straight away from the space station. The first one I'll say now, and the second one will become apparent in just a few moments. More like a few minutes. So the first one, I've still got crew. I've retained the entirety of the crew, despite the fact that they were brought up here in this SSTO with the sole purpose of being on the tourism centre for later things. So because I undocked immediately, I haven't really... I've kind of gone back a few steps in terms of progress. But that doesn't particularly matter because, you know, we might as well... We can send up another one at any time, right? It doesn't really matter. What we want is just to get this episode done. So here's Matt Kerman, spinning the spaceship round, pointing it back down so that it is in the correct prograde position. And we will shortly begin to accelerate down towards ground. Now I just want to say one thing, because I watched Gravity recently, fairly recently, it was a couple of weeks ago now, and there's one thing that people don't seem to get, and that's that to go down towards a planet from orbit or from space in general, you don't burn straight down towards it. Sure, that would work. It's highly inefficient and dangerous, but it would probably work. And the thing with Gravity that didn't really annoy me, because I half expected all the bad science, because there's no film that's got it completely right yet, really, in terms of science. Or at least orbital mechanics. But it's funny because one of the astronauts, they're supposed to be astronauts, you know, trained in orbital mechanics, trained to do their job properly. And then one of them was supposed to be the authoritative figure, you know, the figure of safety. And he goes, "It's not hard. It ain't rocket science. You just burn down towards the ground." Well, hang on. There's so many things wrong with that. It was quite funny, actually. It was quite funny, but not for the reasons they intended. They intended it to be funny because, oh, it's rocket science. But it is, isn't it? It is actually rocket science because you're in space. That's funny. No, it was funny because he clearly had no idea what he was talking about, and yet he was in space. So presumably he had the training, but he just chose not to listen. Anyway, what was that second problem, Harvey? Well, it's this. We've nearly run out of fuel. Because I undocked and I didn't refuel from the space station, so we're running on the last slithers. Oh, okay, there we go, and it's completely flamed out. Now, for some reason, the fuels weren't actually balanced between the two tanks there, so one of them flamed out before the other one. But we managed to control. We didn't go into a flat spin or anything, and using RCS, which is now run out actually, using just gliding. Come down a bit prematurely. Oh, okay, we're down, but we're okay. Oh, hit the hill. Oh, command pod comes off, and the plane dies. And that's that. Yeah, I didn't actually... It was a bit of a premature cut-off there, mainly because what happened after that, I would have been okay. I think a lot of people kind of survived. I think only one person actually died in that crash, I'm guessing. Never will find out, because what happened was... I tried to switch to the debris that went off racing past the command pod onto the runway, and ended up switching to a load of intakes that were bouncing in the sea somewhere. And because they were bouncing in the sea and not still, I couldn't just swap back to anything else, it wouldn't let me. So I had to go to the Space Center, and it warns me that, oh, your last save point was 13 minutes ago. Now, actually, right at this point in time that we're looking at in the video. So, unfortunately, we're going to have to do that again, and this time, we shall do it right. This time we shall offload our Kerbals first, as we have just proceeded to do, and we shall actually refuel. Because unfortunately this tourism centre, okay, it wasn't intended for refueling purposes, but it did have, luckily, it did have one little tank of fuel that was sufficient to give us that extra little bit of fuel needed to get down towards Kerbal. So we'll transfer everything out of this main liquid tanks now that we've used them to deorbit, spin the ship around once more, and proceed to try and do the same thing, but better this time. So, engines on, open the intakes, try and give us some more drag coming over the second continent to the west of our Kerbal Space Center. Down into the atmosphere, we should start to see it burning a bit brighter. Now, we overshot last time, so I've done a bit more deorbiting burning using the extra fuel, and we look like we're going to overshoot, but actually, we end up coming down essentially right on top of it. Now, what we could do is try and turn around, but you know, I thought, Matsuko Kerman's a pro. How about we just nosedive straight down? And actually does quite work. I think the aerodynamics in the vanilla game aren't particularly great, because we were actually slowing down that entire time. So we shall see. We've come in, we're still at a bit of a higher angle. I did nosedive in order to try and make it a bit of a shallow one when we came to land, but we seem to be managing it okay, so come down, get closer, and if we cut off the engines about now, and come in with a nice thunk, nice little landing. Excellent, nothing broken, Matsuko Kerman's still alive, plenty of fuel left in the jets. What we'll do now is basically get this thing refurbished. It'll be towed out towards the spaceplane hangar, checked for the plates to make sure that nothing's burnt up or broken away, replace anything that has, and put fuel back in it, and put it back on the runway, this time with extra Kerbals inside, because yes, we're going to take passengers out on this trip. It's a first trip of its kind, but we are actually going to transport crew as well, so we'll see how this goes. Now, I'm fairly confident. I think that we will have sufficient fuel to get to Jool. Unfortunately, I think there might be some sort of orbital maneuver that I haven't really factored in, and will end up with insufficient fuel to actually get down onto the lathe, or to get into orbit around the lathe, but we shall see. So, this is the SSTO routine that we've seen quite a few times, but I really enjoy flying it, so I'm actually going to commentate over it as well, because it's quite... I've got quite good at doing it, I find. Burn upwards of 45 degrees until you get to 10 kilometers. Turn over to about 22.5, so half of that when you get to 15. From 10 up until you get to about 15, and then you tip down a bit more until you're just climbing steadily and increasing speed all the way up until you get to 1.3 kilometers per second. That's the minimum, really. That's what you really want to aim for. But you may end up doing less than that, because you have to start the liquid engine when the intake air gets below 0.4, and then drop down to just 2 engines until it gets down below 0.2, cut off all the engines, tip back up and point 45 degrees once more, now at an altitude of about 25 kilometers, until you do this burn and get your apparatus up basically out of the atmosphere. And it works every single time. Nearly every single time. Sometimes I do stupid things like leave engines on when I'm not supposed to, and that ends up fueling out or flaming out, and then spinning and doing 180-degree spins, and then continuing regardless. Luckily that didn't happen today, although it was quite a sight when it did happen. And now we can just get into orbit, burning a bit higher than usual because we are actually ahead of the space station, so we want to be in a higher orbit in order to allow it to catch up with us. But that's not a problem. We do have some fuel spare that we are going to be using for rendezvousing and for orbital maneuvers like this. So, get our apparatus up, circular orbit, just higher, and do plenty of time warping around. And we'll time warp and time warp and time warp whilst I get a tissue. Yes, here we go. Having successfully blown my nose, cleared out my nostrils, and got into orbit and rendezvoused with the space station, we're now ready to come down and dock. Or come across, more like. From the current camera angle, it's more across. Okay, no, now it's down. Yep, there we go, now we're going to come down and dock. And this is the space station. This is our LKO space station, the oldest, I think. In terms of games canon, this one's been around for... Ooh, it's gotta be over 10 years now, I should think. Maybe that's something to investigate actually, that'd be quite interesting. Because we established this first, and then we did so many Jool trips and Jool rendezvous and, you know, all of that, which took a lot of time. I'm guessing it's quite old by now. Perhaps some of the parts are going to start decaying and not functioning properly. We'll have to send up repair crews and whatnot, but we shall see. I don't know if there's actually anyone in the space station. There is room for people. There's a hitchhiker storage container up there, and there's the actual command pod itself that we can see just in the centre of the screen there. So I'm not sure if there is actually one manning it, but no matter. We don't need anyone manning it for this. We've arrived, we've docked onto our fuel reserve specifically designed for the SSTO, docked onto the belly now, and we want to burn away, burn backwards, come around, and generally get the other one. Everything's full of fuel, so we don't have to do an awful lot of refueling, just to fill up the tank that we have on the actual spaceplane itself, which we have already done. I just lost over it in the editing. Bring this thing around and speed it up slightly because it's taking a little while. Recording this entire thing, it took an hour and 50 minutes to record all the footage for this video, largely because it was lagging quite a bit more than usual. In fact, I'm surprised by the number of parts this thing must have, you know, this thing plus the space station that we're just about to dock to, in order to make it lag that much. It was literally running about 5 FPS, which is interesting. So the majority of this video has been sped up to 2 times or 4 times speed, and the 2 times looks pretty normal in terms of how fast it seems. You probably won't have noticed actually. Depends, because the music will have been sped up obviously, and the music wasn't real time, so it will definitely have sounded sped up, but visuals wise it looks relatively fluid. It's a problem that I thought I had got rid of, but maybe I need to upgrade my rig again. But we shall see. That'll be coming in the future, I'm sure. My birthday in January. Can probably write it off as a birthday present to myself. Anyway, I wonder if you can claim VAT back for that. Anyway, we've docked, we've got both our fuel reserves transferred onto the spaceplane. Now we plot out a course for Jool, and we will eventually burn for that course for Jool. So here we go, we've got a manoeuvre node set up. We're currently on the opposite side of the planet, but no matter, we shall be time warping around. And it actually just looks... it doesn't look that weird. I was thinking it was going to look incredibly out of place. Instead, it just turns it from a plane into a high-tech rocket, I think. You know, docking ports and extra fuel tanks up here and... well, actually, from this camera angle, it does look quite weird, I will admit. Yeah. Oh, excuse me. Oh well. The tourists are inside the plane, right? They need to look at it. It doesn't really matter how aesthetically appealing it is. So we'll warp around. Oh no, hang on, no. Our capsule is the one on the left. Not the station, the ship icon. I'm pointing to it with my fingers, can you believe that? I can, because I'm doing it. Yeah, our one is coming up to it now. We have 3 minutes 30 seconds, 3 minutes 35 seconds left until the burn. I don't know how long it's going to take. The estimated burn is reading NA currently because it doesn't know. It has yet to calculate the thrust produced by this engine. Or is it the thrust, or is it just the acceleration of the craft in total, determined by the mass and the thrust of the engine? Now, the engine itself is quite powerful. I mean, it's an aerospike, so it does have something like 200... Oh, phone, shut up. Where is it? Where is it, actually? Oh, it's all the way on the opposite side of the room. Huh. Sounded very loud. Anyway, yes, the aerospike, it has a lot of thrust. It's like 200 kilonewtons. And yet this burn takes a very long time. It takes longer than 7 minutes. And that's not even necessarily because of the thrust itself. That's because we have to stop and redo and basically transfer fuel every time this thing runs out, because it doesn't feed directly from our fuel reserves. It feeds from the main tanks, and when they run out like this, we have to take it and transfer from each side. Now, to keep it even, what I do is, on the top, I transfer from the right down to the right side of the tank. And then from the bottom I transfer from the left Oh no, it's the other way around, from top to the left, no, top left down to the left, and then bottom right up to the middle right. Because it's really awkward because the plane is split down the middle. It's not a biplane, but there's a plane with bi-tanks. So it's not just one tank to transfer fuel into, you have to have two, and it's really difficult. And it does create some sort of delay. So we're up at nearly 300,000 meters above the surface when that lot that we've just transferred runs out for the second time, and we transfer the rest. The remaining fuel, this is the last lot now. The last lot being transferred into the tanks. And normally I say, oh, you know, we're not going to litter. We're not really going to do any littering. We try to remove or reduce space debris to as little as possible. But we really want this mission to succeed, and at this second, right now, I'm quite doubtful that it will. So, you know what, we'll detach the tanks, leave them here. They'll probably end up hitting a moon at some point. They won't, but, you know, they might. The common public, if we just said, oh, we've left some space debris, but don't worry, in a few years' time it'll probably hit a planet and be fine. I reckon the common public would accept that. In reality, it's going to keep on orbiting forever. It's very unlikely that it will actually hit anything, so we've just created more debris to worry about later. Fortunately, it's in interplanetary space, so there really is nothing there, and the likelihood of anything being disrupted by its presence is extremely small. In fact, the likelihood of anything actually ever getting to meet it, whether hitting it or rendezvousing with it, even if you want to, is so incredibly small that it would take so much effort that it's really not worthwhile. Besides, they're just empty tanks. Why am I even talking about this? Who knows? Certainly not me. So we get to Jool. We do actually manage to complete the burn with what fuel we have left, and we do actually have quite a lot of fuel left. It's like 9/10 of our capacity. Didn't take much more just to finish that intersect. And from here we of course have to get down to Lathe. Now, this is where I make the third mistake of the episode, and it's a shame really, because it could have been so good, but I ruined it by not thinking properly. Or not remembering properly. I guess it's probably the fault of past me for doing it in the first place, but it's something that I should have really anticipated, or at least checked. Anyway, it'll become apparent in just a few moments. So, I burn down, I burn past Jool, I get to this point and think, okay, now I have to aerobrake, I have to slow down in the atmosphere. I'll quick save. And I do, I quick save at this point. You might not be able to see it on the footage, but I have quick saved right now. So, okay. I'm on the trajectory that's heading me on onto a 90-degree orbit, essentially. So I burn, I get down, I have this aerobraking maneuver, try and set it up. First one's unsuccessful, which we shall see in just a moment, but it looks beautiful, so that really doesn't matter. 19 kilometers is what I've gone for, 19 kilometers above the surface. Based on previous expertise, that may be okay. Now, have a look at this. Have a look at, just before we see the awesome thing, you see in orbit, you see that space station, or its ship, it's going round in a 270-degree orbit. Oh, look at those wings bend! Crap, forget about the 270-degree orbit, look at that! I didn't realise that it actually generated any force from air resistance, but it does. And those wings should have snapped off, but they didn't. Not that it would have mattered either way, because, you know, we're not in orbit. But those wings, they bent, man. Anyway, look into orbit. See the ship? Yeah, it's going round in a 270-degree orbit. We are going to aerobrake into the wrong orbit, travelling clockwise, or anti-clockwise, as opposed to clockwise, which our space station that we're intending to rendezvous with is travelling. Oh man, such a simple mistake. I always put things into 90-degree orbits, except for this one space station apparently, which is very annoying. And what I was hoping to do at this point in time, I was hoping, okay, we aerobrake into a, into a closed trajectory. We're not going to leave the Lathe orbit. And hopefully we'll get one that's really, really high up so that we're travelling very slow at the apoapsis and we can just flip it around, no problem. That doesn't happen, unfortunately. And we have to end up burning prograde just to try and keep the apoapsis higher, but it is futile, so we let it descend. And now we're essentially going to end up with an orbit that is completely opposite to the one we're trying to get into. And the amount of delta V that it would cost to try and reverse that orbit is probably a lot more than we have. What are we going to do, I really don't know. It might be possible to to land and then to get back into orbit from there in the correct way. That probably, I don't know, maybe. What if we land and then make something that can supply fuel to this on the ground? Or we could just bring something here, get into orbit, and match this orbit, transfer fuel, deorbit that particular thing so we don't have to worry about it, and then use this to reverse the orbit and get down. And rendezvous with the station. There's a lot of options, and none of them are particularly great. I suppose the most entertaining option would be landing the plane, followed by making something on the ground that can refuel the plane. Because that's probably going to have to happen, isn't it? It's probably going to have to happen. If this is the link between orbit and the ground, it's going to be necessary, or almost probably necessary, to have something on the ground that can refuel the plane. So I guess that's what we're going to do in the next episode. Unless we find some other project to work on. We could just leave this temporarily and concentrate on other things. Leave your responses in the comments section below. What should we do? You decide. Epic. 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 Yeah, that was a terrible reference. Because I'm getting to the end, I'm running out of things to say. I might as well do the ending. Hopefully it'll take long enough time. Thank you very much for watching. Look at this! Look at them! They're going to hit each other if they were in the same orbit. Man, that's going to be difficult to solve. Thank you very much for watching this particular episode of Space Tourism. If you would like to buy some HOCgaming merch, it's not too late. You can get it from a link in the description. Thank you very much for watching, and I shall see you all next time.